Welcome to Watchtower History. Remember, Rutherford in his document states that trouble started with him and Fisher somewhere in the summer of 1922. What happened in the summer of 1922 that you remember, Paul?
The conventions and the trumpet blasts, the new light,
Yeah, which particular convention?
the Cedar Point would be
That's the famous one, yeah.
the famous one.
And we've discussed that one in our first trumpet blast discussion. So if you haven't seen that one, we have a 3-parter on that. That was interesting. So here's what Fisher says. This is what happened. Fisher wrote, I was condemned for maintaining an objection to a Tower article when the other 3 editors, Hemery never having a vote, agreed, and was told emphatically that I ought to go along with the others, when it had been the rule of the Tower Board up to that moment that the objection of one editor was to hold up articles for 3 months' discussion and prayer. And it was the bounden duty of each editor to judge each article as to truth and error according to his conscience. Brother Rutherford said that he would print anything he wanted to in the Tower, entirely regardless of all the other editors. Then, to fit my case, Brother Rutherford had the directors vote that the vote of one editor could not hold up a proposed article, but that 4 votes for an article would approve it. Brother Rutherford to vote his own vote and that of Brother Hemery. So Rutherford had 2 votes. And they're trying to dismiss Fisher's vote by changing that rule, right? And Rutherford did that a lot, changing the rules to get power and to control things his own way. See our interview with Rude Person on that. Brother Rutherford to vote his own vote and that of Brother Hemery, so that it is now an ordinary majority vote on Tower articles. And the safeguard provided by Brother Russell was finally thrown away. 2 votes were taken condemning me and demanding my resignation. I said to resign under such a condition was to admit that I thought myself guilty of wrongdoing, whereas I had acted and was acting in good conscience. When asked point blank if I would cease saying anything different from what was in the Tower, I said that I was divinely consecrated to uphold truth and oppose error and could not do otherwise. I like his integrity. I like that he tried to do the right thing. Especially seeing the things, not just with the editorial here, but seeing some of the personal failings of Rutherford the man as well, and trying to handle the situation through a proposed church trial and possible disfellowship. That is honorable.
What is quoted there in the letter is absolute truth. If you were to read the will, it actually said what Russell wanted and how he wanted things handled to avoid someone taking over the Watchtower and taking it in other directions. You can't change somebody's will, but you can change a corporate charter. And if nobody objects and nobody takes it to the law of the land, you can write whatever you want and say and do whatever you want. And why I say this is, if I were to die and leave you my Jeff and Paul show,
I want your library behind you.
If I would were to pass away and say I would like the Watchtower History Channel to only do this, this, and that, as long as nobody complains, my wife or anybody else, you could do whatever you want. It's when you look into it, and we said that before in earlier in discussions about this. So going back to both charter and will, it did state 3 months discussion. Drop it, table the matter. 3 months discussion, and he even included prayer, and then decide what you're going to do. Okay, this was like, no, oh, and by the way, I'm taking another vote while I'm at it. It's just, it was
and
just,
not all 5 votes are needed anymore. If only one
yeah.
vote is against, well, because you're opposing all these ideas I'm having, we're just going to make it so 4 votes count.
Which later became, if in the Watchtower published it, it was under the Lord's direction that only one person needed to do it. If you
Good.
remember that Watchtower article.
Yes, and we will get into that in just a moment. Stay tuned.
A lot of people don't understand totally the progression of what happened entirely, and we'll get into it when we do the will and all that, of the society when Rutherford took over. One, he took over, changed a lot of things. There was a lot of resentment, and then a lot of or a lot of resistance. There was a lot of resistance, and then it kind of like died down. They backed away. Let the Lord deal with it. And but then he started changing ideas and doctrines and thing, and then everybody started going, whoa, 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 wait, that we're not doing that, and they went again. So there were really like two rounds of disagreement with Rutherford in that time period that lasted from 1916 basically to 1930-31, when the whole new light thing just went ridiculous and they 75% walked away. Going back to the Bruder document, where it says literally, now at the direction of the president, these brothers were expelled out of the elder's office and from the congregation. But with these outcast brothers, 80% of the brethren declared their solidarity and left the International Bible Students. So 20% left then. There was the first ring of it and enough, but the light didn't change at that point. They were still clinging to Bible student beliefs. So only 20% left. Well, you go forward in time. By the time they hit 1931, it was like, okay, that's when the rest, just 75% of those who were there just walked away. So this was a progression. And here's the evidence. Here's the stuff we're documenting and showing.
So here's our timeline. Think about the timeline. So 1922, Rutherford tells the audience that that's when he started having issues. There were issues between him and Fisher that were brewing. That was our Cedar Point Convention. Fisher resigns in the spring of 1924. And it's over these editorial decisions. So in between those 2 years, Rutherford changes the rules so that he can slip in whatever articles that he wants.
And that's important for people to know. That's very important for people to know. Because up until then, it was they were following an accepted belief. And now, only one person can change it. That's the key. And that's the key to where we're at today.
And so in 22, it wasn't just the personal failings of these men coming and asking Rutherford, I want a divorce, asking the Pope for a divorce. It wasn't just Rutherford's own personal failings of going to the burlesque. What was the next convention, the second trumpet blast? What was the real first main change there? In 1923, that second trumpet blast, what was that first real big main doctrinal change?
That's when they did the sheep and the goats.
Okay. And we had a discussion on that already. If you haven't seen that, go back and take a look. But basically, what Rutherford's doing is saying, hey, Bible students went to prison. I went to prison. And in Matthew 25, it says, when did you come and serve me? Well, when I went in prison. So Rutherford's basically saying this scripture is all about Watchtower. And because he's the one taking the lead in Watchtower, it's all about me. I went to prison. I must be the chosen one to take the lead. So it's all about me. And so Rutherford starts here applying every type, prophecy, parable, all entirely to Watchtower after 1914, 1918, and 19 because of his prison experience. Like we said many times, prison really changed Rutherford, and here's a prime example of that. So now the third trumpet blast. When we get to 1924, what was the third trumpet blast about, and what happened there? Basically, that third convention, that third trumpet blast convention, was the one that he says, well, the Jews didn't return to their homeland, so they can't literally fulfill the Jubilees in 1925. So it can't be the literal Jews. It must be the spiritual Jews that are going to blow the trumpet. And by the way, we're the spiritual Jews, so it's all about us. It's all about me because I'm the one taking the lead. So 1925 is going to happen, but invisibly, spiritually. 1925. Now, this is after Fisher resigns, after he's basically forced out. This is the fourth trumpet blast.
We'll get into the fourth trumpet in this article when we get to that discussion, which we plan on doing in the future.
But it was this article that was summarized in a verse-by-verse form that is replaced in that final edition of the Finished Mystery that Rutherford republishes without the Ezekiel portion.
And we had to do it this way because by having the discussions on the first three and then doing some historical research and documentation, origins and all that, now it could put the fourth trumpet blast and Birth of the Nation in a whole new light.
And it gives the background information to it, right? What led up to it.
Yeah, it's realistic version of what happened.
And so this is the article, and just to summarize it, and we'll deal with it in more detail in that future discussion. This is the article where he reinterprets Revelation 12 to say, hey, the dragon Satan is cast out of heaven in 1914, and Watchtower's chosen, and Jehovah is going to cleanse the organization. And oh, by the way, I'm the one taking the lead. And so therefore, it's all about me and Watchtower.
So now here, basically, you're showing one interpretation of the dragon. Now, in 1925, in the stars and all that, in 1925, hear how this was interpreted. Stars symbolize leaders in the church who possess a knowledge of present truth. Stars could not symbolize nominal leaders because they have no knowledge of present truth. Quoting Revelation, and his tail drew the third part of the stars. In that trouble that began in the fall of 1917, which is really the beginning of 1918, it would not be unreasonable to estimate that 1/3 of the then leaders of present truth on earth were turned against the Lord's kingdom work and have been against it since. It was the tail of the devil's organization down at this end that drew them. So here we have in the same year two different interpretations of the same scripture.
And he's applying it to the trouble that happened in 1917, 1918.
And those resisting him.
Yeah. It was the trouble that he himself caused by illegally taking over Watchtower. And the ones resisting him were, trying to prevent an illegal takeover. Again, see our interview with Rude Person in the book that he's publishing. Very fascinating discussion, and he really lays the evidence out for that. Be sure to get the book as well. In 1927, and this is after Fisher's died, you have an editorial committee listed here. See, editorial committees J.F. Rutherford, Hemery, that would be Rutherford's 2 votes, Van Amberg, Barber, and Coward. In the June 15th, 1938 Watchtower, Rutherford writes an article called Organization. And in this article, Rutherford talks about this Birth of a Nation article. And it's interesting what he says about this article. The facts which the Lord caused to be brought to pass in the year 1925 show the fulfillment of this prophetic ceremony. In that year, the name of Jehovah began to come to the fore, and it came to be appreciated that Jehovah would now make a name for himself. In the beginning of the first Hebrew month, the Watchtower of March 1st, 1925, published the article, The Birth of the Nation, meaning the kingdom had begun to function. That's his invisible 1925 fulfillment, right? An editorial committee, humanly provided for, was then supposed to control the publication of the Watchtower. And remember, we've just looked at what Rutherford's already trying to do with the editorial committee, with Fisher. Now he's talking about this editorial committee again. An editorial committee, humanly provided for, then was supposed to control the publication of the Watchtower, and the majority of that committee strenuously objected to the publication of the article, The Birth of the Nation. But by the Lord's grace, it was published. And that really marked the beginning of the end of the Editorial Committee, indicating that the Lord himself is running the organization. Following that, to wit, at the Indianapolis Convention, the fourth trumpet blast, in 1925, the resolution Message of Hope was published, and among other things contains the words, "The time has come for God to make for himself a name in the earth, and for the peoples to know the truth concerning the divine purpose, which is the only means of salvation for the world." So in other words, you have to believe what the Watchtower is telling you, and since I'm the one taking the lead, you got to believe what I'm telling
And once again, the subjective implications of things indicating that the Lord himself is running this. Well, you have to agree with it, or what if you don't? What if you question it, for one? And two, look at how it's being done. It's a slow transition. First, we get rid of a member here. We change this, we do that, till finally it hit what Rutherford was actually really trying to do, and that's take full control of what the Watchtower said and did. So that was basically that slow transition and how it got there. And it is amazing the resistance that people gave on this article when this came out.
you. It's fascinating. And he does discuss this again.
But he discusses it under the victorious. Once again, he who
Yeah.
is victorious writes the history. So everything Jehovah's Witnesses know about that time frame was published by the people who caused it and the people involved in it, not the other side opposed to it.
He discusses this again a couple months later in 1938. And the July 1st, 1938 Watchtower, in part one of his article, His War, Rutherford says, and this is describing, and listen to, is very interesting how he describes the editorial committee. They thus seeking information and knowledge, the Lord revealed to his people the understanding of the war in heaven and the beginning of the kingdom. And this led to the publication, as of March 1st, 1925, in the Watchtower of the article, The Birth of the Nation, and which caused a real stir or shakeup within the ranks of the professed people of God and caused the faithful ones to be more active and also caused the opponents to show themselves. Notice he's mentioning opponents. Who opposed his article, right? We know the editorial committee opposed the article. In that article, the Lord revealed to his people the combined forces of Satan and that they were marching to the attack against the servants of the Lord and were bent on the destruction of those to whom the Lord Jesus has committed his testimony. Well, it's Rutherford's testimony, so it's committing against him, in which people keep the commandments of God. It appeared to them for the first time that they were certain to be subjected to a real warfare. Who's causing the war? It's Rutherford. On page 74 of that article, the statement is made, make no mistake, by treating this war as a light or trivial thing, Satan will use every conceivable method to destroy the remnant of Zion. The fight is on to a finish. Thus the Lord was bringing to his people on earth information of the combined efforts of the enemy under Satan to destroy those who are on the Lord's side. Satan then tried to prevent the publication of that article concerning the birth of the nation. So he's calling his editors Satan?
More or less.
Yeah, wow.
Or at least influencing them and behind it.
But failed in that effort. So its publication was a start or beginning of clarifying the great issue which now must be settled, namely the vindication of God's name. And the subject of vindication is another subject for another time. We found some interesting things about that. I'm sure you'll like it.
And it's very interesting. You could see that transition of how everything's a war now. Rutherford converts everything against him as a war and an attack from Satan. What do current modern day Jehovah's Witnesses feel? You disagree with it's attack from Satan. Your coworkers are attacking you from Satan. Anyone who is opposing what you're disagreeing, everything's an attack from Satan. And here it is. You could see a lot of where it started from.
Yeah, and the same thing with Watchtower's current reinterpretation of the King of the North. It's really whoever is persecuting and giving problems to Watchtower at any point in history. So in World War One, it was one thing, and World War Two was something else, and the Cold War is something else, and now it's something different. So it's constantly changing and evolving, but it's pretty much whoever is against us are the real enemy because we're the chosen ones.
And people react and respond to that and get caught up in it. Um, if you've ever gotten with someone and they think you're getting too apostate or whatever, or disagreeing with them so much, they really think you're trying to implant seeds from Satan into their mind to destroy their faith and respond as if it were a real attack from a spirit creature themselves. It's quite fascinating, at the least, to observe it or be part of that. But it's also sad, on the other hand, that you can't be a Berean, truly be a Berean, and say, "Oh well," and then walk away. "Oh well, okay, if you feel that way, fine. Nice talking to you. I'll see you again next week." It doesn't work that way. It's an attack,
and
and you must flee before they put an idea in your head that might fester and question what they're already teaching you.
and we know at the end of the 1920s, 75% of those who had existed as Bible students before that were gone. And Schnell's book, In the Light of Christianity, he adds that it wasn't just those who left because of the teachings that were coming about. It was also because they were pushed out. They were disfellowshipped. They were sent out. If you opposed the teachings, if you opposed Rutherford, there was no unity,
You're,
you were cast aside, including the editors.
which we have a discussion on unity that we need to get together and do here in the near future.
It'll
Oh,
be a very interesting discussion. Really, this is how the culture came to be. This is how the modern Watchtower originated from. It all started from these things. We know what happened. Sometimes it's important in discussions like this to discuss why it happened. And so I find these discussions very fascinating to get into what they were saying as to why these things were happening at the time.